war. We're so happy to welcome you and thank you for joining us for our World Day Against Trafficking in Persons program event. I'm going to ask everyone to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. We are pleased to acknowledge our distinguished guests, Undersecretary of War for Personnel Readiness, the Honorable Anthony Tater, the National Guard Bureau J1, Major General Lavetta Bennett, the Director for Personnel Readiness Management Agency, Ms. Ann Lee, the Director for Defense Support Service Center, Dr. Liz Clark. We also have our Deputy for Personnel Readiness Management Agency, Mr. Sorrento. We also have Executive Director for Law Enforcement, Pentagon Force Protection Agency, Mr. We have the Chief of Police, Pentagon Force Protection Agency, Stephen Taylor. Thank you for attending. We also have the U.S. Marine Corps veteran and founder of the Association for the Recovery of Children, Mr. Basil Boz, U.S. Marine Corps veteran, president and CEO of Trafficking in America Task Force, child sex trafficking survivor, a survivor leader, Jerome Elam, a director of Survivor Initiatives for No Trafficking Zone, survivor of human trafficking, Courtney Levette, subject matter expert for Combating Trafficking in Persons Office, Ms. Laura Lederer. And we're also pleased to recognize, acknowledge all our federal partners that have joined us, that are also from other Combating Trafficking in Persons Office throughout the federal government, and our survivors of human trafficking. Thank you guys for taking time to come here and share with us in this event. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2014, the United Nations designated July 30th as World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. It's a day to raise awareness about and improve coordination efforts against human trafficking. Today, we will focus on how the warfighter role in combating human trafficking supports the 2026 National Defense Strategy priority of defending the U.S. homeland. The warfighter must understand these new adversaries and their irregular tactics and tools that they use. The CTIP office, my program office here, developed resources to help prepare warfighters to take on this global adversary. We have an incredible group of speakers today. We will be glad to answer questions at the end of the presentations, but we will have a Q&A to close out our program. So please hold your questions until that time. And now, I would like to welcome to the stage my boss, Dr. Liz Clark, a phenomenal leader that's been a great support to this program. She's going to come up and introduce the Honorable Tater. Dr. Clark.
Good morning. It is my distinct honor to introduce the Honorable Anthony J. Tater, who is the Undersecretary of War for Personnel Readiness in the Department of War, acting as the principal advisor to the Secretary on Military and Civilian Personnel Readiness, Health Affairs, Education, and Quality of Life Matters. A 1981 graduate of West Point, Mr. Tater served in the Army for 28 years before retiring as an esteemed general and combat veteran. During his distinguished military career, he commanded a paratrooper battalion in the 82nd Airborne Division and an air assault brigade in the 101st Airborne Division, and was the Deputy Commandant General of the 10th Mountain Division. Mr. Tata went on to hold leadership positions at the federal, state, and local levels of government, as well as executive roles in several private sector organizations. Today, he is proud to be back in the Department of War, serving our warriors, their families, and department civilians. Sir, it's my honor to introduce you.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. I appreciate that introduction, and I also want to thank Director Dixon for pulling all this together wherever you are. I'm looking out in the crowd. There he is. She is waving at me. And we have a very strong Pentagon Force Protection Agency presence here. And every day that I come, I leave, and drive around, these great men and women are providing protection for not just senior leadership, but for all of us in the building here. And I'd like to give them a round of applause, actually, for all they do. And General Bennett, thank you for being here today from National Guard Bureau. I truly appreciate your presence and the role that you and your team play in helping us to combat human trafficking, which is the topic we're here to discuss today. And it's a serious topic and one that is a contributor to human rights abuse. And therefore, it is also a national security concern. And if we recall, since his first term, President Trump made clear a commitment to confronting this really bad crime, this egregious crime of supporting victims and holding traffickers accountable through the release of an executive order. Which is a directive personally from the president that it was a comprehensive plan to combat human trafficking and more recently the designation of cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. That was no small move, that designation of cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. And the Department of War plays a critical role in delivering on these directives. We've done a lot to support the Department of Homeland Security in securing the border, and we also do a lot in our own right with their own mission set to secure the border. And I would just say it's an honor for me to be up here joining you to underscore our absolute resolve on this issue. And I want to thank the dedicated Combating Trafficking in Persons team for organizing the engagement, and our colleagues in NORTHCOM and the National Guard for their longstanding collaboration. So let's give all of them a round of applause as well. And the reason is because they work so hard. It can be kind of a political hot topic, but at the end of the day, we all know it's happening. And we all know that there are victims out there that we need to protect, and we need to stop the human trafficking that is going on. And I can think of no one better to highlight who's sort of made it his life's mission, and that's my good friend Basil Baz, who's right here in front of us. And I've known him for a couple of decades now, and he looks like a Hollywood actor because he is. He does a lot of different things, and I just want to one day be a stunt double. That's my bucket list. And but I'd have to grow my hair and look tougher and do a bunch of push-ups. He's a former Marine, a CIA officer, And he founded the Association for Recovery of Children. And when I first met Basil, it was in Southern California, and we were talking. He talked about his mission and his dedication to going across the border and recovering children. And that's been his life's purpose. We all have these higher utopian goals in our life, and here's a man who's living that life, sacrificing his time, his efforts, his resources to do that. And he's dedicated years of his life to doing the very essence of what we're talking about right now. And I just have absolute respect for you, Basil, as a friend, as someone who has given his heart to this mission, and you're the embodiment of what we should all be praising as we try to drive this mission forward. Former Marine, former CIA, current genius in Southern California and around the world on combating trafficking in persons. And let's give Basil a big round of applause, please. They call him the patron saint for missing kids, and that's I know I'm giving him more attention than he ever wanted in his life, but he deserves it. And our shared focus on combating human trafficking is directly in line with our values here in the department and as a nation. And under the leadership of Secretary Hegseth, the department is dedicated to restoring the warrior ethos. That's not news. That's day one. The Secretary came in and started talking about rebuilding the military, reestablishing deterrence, and restoring the warrior ethos, and achieving peace through strength, and preparing our warfighters and civilians to recognize and report trafficking is critical to all of that. It's critical to countering foreign terrorist organizations at home and around the world. It is the combating human trafficking reinforces this idea of peace through strength, because if it's going on, if it's happening at higher rates, which it is, it's eroding our strength. It's eroding our confidence as a nation that we can secure ourselves and secure our borders. And as we know, human trafficking is actually surging globally, driven by super sophisticated organized crime networks that account for over 70% of all detected cases. Federal case law highlights clear linkages between human trafficking and drug smuggling, terrorism, arms trafficking, migrant smuggling, espionage, and other criminal activities that are too abhorrent to even mention. And these activities, which are particularly visible along our borders, erode public safety, finance our adversaries, and weaken our country. And that financing our adversaries is something that we really don't think about, but it is a trade, as Basil talked to you about. It is a business, and the people get paid to do it, and the victims are the ones that suffer the most. The department understands that addressing human trafficking is not just a moral obligation, it's a national security imperative, one that's central to executing on a key tenet in the 2026 National Defense Strategy, and that's defending the homeland. So all of us in here, we're discussing about the National Defense Strategy, how to secure the borders, defend the homeland, because that is the number one tenet. You got China and defend the homeland. That's really the 1-2 punch of the National Defense Strategy that this team, my colleague Bridge Colby and the Secretary and others, we all took a cut at it, but it was really Bridge's drive and brilliance that pulled all that together, and then obviously put forth by the Secretary and approved by the Secretary and then ultimately up to the president. So today, the troops stationed along our front lines are securing our borders, countering narco-terrorists, securing key terrain. They accomplish this in part by dismantling cartel networks and severing the revenue streams for these criminal organizations. And it's hard because it's sanctuary. And we all know, all of us that were in the Afghan fight know what it was like for somebody to run across the border into Pakistan and you couldn't get at them. And you just knew that they were just cleaning their weapon and rearming and refitting, and then they were going to come back and fight you. That's kind of what it's like with these cartels. And they're not the only ones doing this, but in large part, that's along our southern border, we have a lot of that. And so because of that, the department's working closely with our federal law enforcement partners, of which PIPA is one of them, the Pentagon Force Protection Agency, and foreign partners around the world to defeat these networks. And doing so, we're actively preventing human trafficking. We're mitigating human trafficking. We're not preventing it. We're mitigating human trafficking, and there's so much more to do. The department remains committed to building and maintaining a fighting force that can continue to identify and deter this really vicious crime that's really levied upon innocent people that great Americans like Basil have spent their lives protecting and defending. And this capability is vital to our overall readiness and critical mission, and it's the right thing to do for our nation and the people that we have sworn to protect. At the end of the day, it's the people that are in the foxhole and the people that are being trafficked that we are talking about here. We can be in this nice, comfortable building, but there's people sweating on the front lines right now. There's people under the floorboards of a van somewhere that need to be rescued, and that's what we're talking about in a real gritty sense, is that this discussion today needs to be, how can we sharpen our focus on that? How can we improve our ability to prevent that from happening? How can we go deep against the networks? How can we fight that close-in fight? And it's a disruption of the network. It's a close fight on how to rescue the folks, and then the intermediary, the logistics networks. It is a combat operation in and of itself, and all of you, all of us, are part of that combat operation. So thank you for all you're doing to prevent the combating of persons or trafficking of persons, to help with the combating. It's a mouthful, combating of trafficking in persons. And I just want to thank you for your ongoing support. We'll continue to address this as a group, as a nation. You have my full commitment. My director out at PRMA, which is the new name of the organization, Ann Lee, who is really the touch point for a lot of this. You've got our commitment, and we look forward to working with you to help fight the deep fight, help fight the close fight, and help all the Basil Bazes of the world out there. And I'm just really proud. I'll be the least important person once Basil comes up here, and he's really an icon in this community. So with that, Basil, I hope that you live up to the billing I gave you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Honorable Tata, for that very enlightening speech and introduction to Basil Baz. Our next speaker brings a critical perspective on how human trafficking directly impacts our nation's readiness and security. Major General Lavetta Bennett serves as the Director of Manpower and Personnel, the J1, for the National Guard Bureau. In her role, she is responsible for the policies and well-being of nearly 500,000 uniformed and civilian personnel who make up the National Guard. This force is not only present in every state and territory of the United States, but also serves in very combatant commands and fosters relationships across the globe through the State Partnership Program, which includes 107 partnerships with 116 nations. Given the Guard's unique and domestic as well as international missions, their personnel are often on the front line in environments where trafficking occurs. So please join me in welcoming Major General Bennett to discuss the National Guard's vital role in combating this threat.
Good morning, everybody. Okay, I hope you all are excited to be here as I am. But first off, I want to express my sincere appreciation to Ms. Linda Dixon for inviting me, and also to you too, Dr. Clark, both for your outstanding leadership and organizing this great event. And also, I know Honorable Tater had to leave, but I wanted to thank him for his remarks and steadfast leadership in this arena. It is a profound honor to stand before you today to mark the World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. Looking at today's program, I am humbled to share the stage with such a great lineup of experts, advocates, and survivors who are sharing their stories. So I do want to say thank you, and I appreciate you. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for your bravery, your unparalleled expertise, and your relentless dedication to this fight. Like everyone in this room, I am eagerly looking forward to hearing your insights. And we've heard a lot about you already, so we are on the edge of our seats. For the men and women in uniform, warfighter is a title we carry with immense pride. It implies a readiness to face our nation's adversaries head-on, to protect the innocent, and to defend the values we hold dear. But today, the adversary we are discussing doesn't always wear a uniform. They don't always operate across a conventional battlefield. And their weapons are often coercion, deceit, and exploitation. To understand how to fight this enemy, we must first understand exactly what human trafficking is and why it has a direct, urgent threat to the National Guard and to our forces as a whole. Make no mistake, human trafficking is the modern-day exploitation of our most vulnerable populations. It is happening right now, hiding in plain sight, in the shadows of the very communities we protect here at home and in the regions where we deploy abroad. It is sex trafficking involving force, fraud, or coercion. It is the recruitment, harboring, or obtaining a person for labor or services through those same means. Put simply, it is compelling another human being to perform commercial sex acts or any form of labor against their will. So some might ask, why is this a military issue? Why is the Director of Manpower and Personnel at the National Guard Bureau speaking about this today? The answer is simple. Trafficking fundamentally affects mission readiness. It compromises force protection, and it threatens the fabric of our core values. Combating trafficking in persons is not just a moral imperative, it is a critical security imperative. Human trafficking networks can operate as an insider threat. When military personnel turn a blind eye to, or worse, become complicit in these activities, it erodes unit trust. It creates massive security vulnerabilities through the potential for blackmail, extortion, and corruption. Above all, it compromises the core values that form the bedrock of our profession of arms. Honor, integrity, and selfless service cannot coexist with the exploitation of human beings. If our force is compromised by this illicit industry, our readiness degrades and our ability to defend the nation falters. The National Guard occupies a highly unique space within the Department of War, and because of that, our encounter with this threat looks different. I represent the nearly 500,000 uniformed and civilian personnel who make up the National Guard. We are not only present in every state and territory of the United States, but also in every combatant command, and we foster relationships across the globe through the State Partnership Program, which, as you heard earlier, includes partnerships with 116 nations. But what makes our force truly distinct is who we are. Approximately 70% of Guardsmen are traditional part-time citizen soldiers and airmen. In their civilian lives, they are school teachers, police officers, truck drivers, nurses, and small business owners. They are deeply embedded in the fabric of the communities we serve. This dual identity means our encounter with human trafficking is twofold. First, in their civilian lives, our personnel are uniquely positioned to spot the subtle warning signs of exploitation during their everyday routines. And secondly, during their military service, they operate where active duty forces often do not, right here, domestically, responding to emergencies in our own backyards. As Guardsmen, we are routinely called upon for non-traditional missions. We support border operations. We respond to catastrophic natural disasters, the floods, the fires, the hurricanes that can displace millions of Americans. In the wake of these crises, chaos often follows, and it is in that chaos that traffickers thrive. They are predators who prey on the vulnerable, the displaced, and the desperate. When our Guardsmen and women are out there distributing aid, setting up shelters, or securing a perimeter in a disaster zone, they are looking directly at the populations that are prime targets for exploitation. We must train our eyes to see it, because if we don't, we are failing the very citizens we serve to protect. But we cannot combat what we do not recognize, which is why robust training is the ultimate shield. So the Department of War has a comprehensive CTIP training program for all personnel, including a biennial refresher training with requirements to ensure our foundational awareness never slips. But because of the National Guard's highly unique community-facing role, we have a dedicated National Guard curriculum that is tailored to our distinct operating environments. This curriculum guarantees that our force masters critical learning objectives, from identifying the physical behavior signs of trafficking in real-world scenarios to mastering precise state, federal, and military reporting pathways. This ensures we report suspected activities swiftly through the correct channels without compromising active law enforcement investigations. Furthermore, because risk environments vary drastically between operations, the National Guard also conducts just-in-time pre-deployment training. Before our units mobilize, whether it's to a domestic stateside mission or an overseas combat theater, they undergo targeted mission-specific preparation. For example, personnel deploying to domestic border security missions receive specialized training to distinguish human smuggling from human trafficking, and they are educated on the tactics used by transnational criminal networks and cartels. For overseas deployments, this training pivots to theater-specific reporting and recognizing third country national labor exploitation. This ensures that when our personnel step out the door, their awareness is sharp, relevant, and immediately actionable. So in conclusion, the message I have for every uniformed service member and every civilian here today is to be aware and be vigilant. Whether you are at home filling sandbags in a flooded American town, working in your civilian job as a first responder, or deployed thousands of miles away in a combat zone, you can encounter this threat. You must be prepared to recognize the signs, and you must have the courage to report it. To the service members and Department of War civilians, thank you. Thank you for your unwavering commitment to our country and your commitment to the ideals of human dignity and freedom. We have a heavy, sobering, but deeply important subject ahead of us today. And I do ask that you pay close attention. Listen to the survivors whose resilience will inspire you. Listen to the experts who have dedicated their lives to mapping and dismantling these networks. Take these invaluable lessons back to your formations and let us ensure that the military remains vigilant in this fight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Major General Bennett. It's so good to hear about how the National Guard is a part of this fight. We depend on them for so many other things, but human trafficking is also one that we agree that they are deeply involved in, and they are out there on the front lines protecting us. So, our next speaker, I guess we all been waiting on. So this guy and I go back. He tells me that me and him are the oldest ones in this fight. We were doing this together for many, many years, and I tell you, the first time I met him, I was blown away. And this is my second time having him come speak at the Department of War event. So I'm so glad that he was able to take some time out of his busy schedule. And as Honorable Tater mentioned, he is known as the patron saint for missing kids. He is a former CIA, Intelligence Special Operations Group paramilitary case officer, recipient of the Intelligence Commendation Medal, former counterterrorism officer in the United States Marine Corps, and a graduate of the Citadel. Basil Boz. In 1993, he founded the Association for the Recovery of Children, an organization comprised of former and active intelligence, military, and law enforcement personnel that are dedicated to the recovery of missing and exploited American children in foreign and domestic locations. He needs no introductions, but join me, please, in welcoming Mr. Boz to the stage.
Good morning. You guys hear me back there? Great. I'm so proud to have the honor of speaking with each of you here today. As you know, Association for the Recovery of Children is a 501c3 nonprofit organization of former intelligence, military, and law enforcement officers who are dedicated to the recovery of missing, exploited, and sex-trafficked American children. Once all local, state, and federal law enforcement efforts have been exhausted or they choose not to get involved, we enter the field. Donations help to finance our operations, allowing us to do this at no cost to the custodial guardians and with no paycheck in our pocket. We do this, as Anthony said, because it's the right thing to do. Thus far, we are blessed to have a 100% success rate, and at every child we have gone after, every American child we've gone after on domestic or foreign soil, we have brought them back. If you keep seeing me raise my hand here, yeah, that's not for the applause, that's for the slide to change. So, as a Marine, I'd like to share with each of you what I see in the audience today among those who have sacrificed so much for our nation, and presuppose that each of you, as warfighters, care about this issue of child sex trafficking as much as I do. When it comes to the children of our country, I don't care who you are. You hurt our children, and we'll break through any wall, any line, any army to get to you. 1,000 shields, 100 men. It won't stop us. We'll bring fire and fury until there's nothing left standing between us. Our blood is our legacy, a heart beating outside of our chest. So understand this. You mess with our children and you'll face a storm that will not stop. There's no warning, there's no mercy, just a promise that you will regret the day you crossed us. We protect what is ours with everything we are. Because with our children, we will be relentless. We'll be unstoppable. And at the end, you'll see the force of our love is a battle you can never win. For we are the greatest fighting force in the world, the United States military. Let me ask each of you here today, is that how you feel about this issue? When I was a child growing up in Fort Gulick in the Panama Canal Zone, I was surrounded by the Army. There was nothing I feared because I knew that U.S. warfighters were there. No one could ever hurt me. They became my heroes, everyone in uniform. They were more than soldiers. They were invincible guardians that would forever protect our nation and even the most insignificant of us in society, known as children. Now, you know, the term child sex trafficking is so commonplace that most people don't even blink an eye when I mention it. So let me take this opportunity to remind all of us in the room what it really is. It is paid child rape. Someone pays money to sexually abuse a 3-year-old girl or a 5-year-old boy or anyone under the age of 18. They have their way with them and they perform horrible acts of evil, whether cutting them up in body parts to sell on the black market, incarcerating them in basements, hotels, and hidden compartments to further abuse them. It is the 7-year-old girl with cigarette burns all over her body, chained to a closet floor, and not fed for days, and yet raped 14 or 15 times a day by male and female predators, tortured by so many STDs and so much trauma that it will not only last her a lifetime if she gets past the age of 12. So let me ask you this question. How do you murder a child without killing them? How do you murder a child without killing them? The answer is simple. You simply sexually abuse them, and they spend the rest of their life dying every single day, with the majority of them seeking suicide to end the pain, always praying that someone will save them, but never knowing if it will ever happen. After my return from Mogadishu, Somalia in 1993 as a CIA Special Operations Officer out of Ground Branch, I realized there was something bigger than overthrowing small governments. I returned to a fight, not on some distant shore, but in my own country to a battle that, if not won, would eventually destroy our republic. The battle is the war against American children, known as child sex trafficking, and organ harvesting, and child pornography, and every crime against children that would destroy those who are the future of our nation. I think it's appropriate at this time to make something very clear in order to unify our efforts. There are no Irish Americans. There are no African Americans. There are no Mexican Americans, and so on in this country. Most have never been to Ireland, or Africa, or Mexico, or outside of America. And when I have been downrange pulling my buddies from the trenches, we all bled the same color. We are simply Americans. And this problem of child sex trafficking is simply an American problem involving American children and will only be fixed by Americans united for this cause. So why should this be important to every warfighter in this room? Because child sex trafficking has cross-pollinated with everything the cartel and the deep state has their hands in. And if I recall correctly, and I think Anthony mentioned it, the cartel has been designated as terrorists, which makes this a threat to national security. So why isn't it our duty to stop it all? I don't know of one high-ranking terrorist leader that has not benefited financially from their actions. I think you know their stream of revenue comes first from child sex trafficking. Second is drugs, and third are illicit businesses. And may I remind all of us in here, this is not a political issue. On many levels, this is a national security issue. The logistical mechanism that is used to transport most, if not all of these children, is the same logistical mechanism used to transport terrorists, illegal weapons, nuclear threats, surface-to-air missiles, and drugs, not only across our borders, but inside our borders as well. We know this because we maintain one of the most robust intelligence platforms in the NGO world, capable of sometimes outperforming some federal agencies. An example is our recent discovery of 28 clean-shaven and tattooed Taliban warfighters that crossed into the U.S. months ago, prepared to unleash attacks across our country. Perhaps some intel you're unaware of. From our most recent operations on the border, I can assure you that it is still wide open, especially in towns like Laredo and Rio Bravo, where some federal employees and some law enforcement are paid by cartel to look the other way, or in some cases, just sit inside their vehicles and drink coffee instead of running the right type of operations to deter illegal entries into the U.S. Whether they lack training or are undermanned or simply don't care, the job of securing our border is not being done to the standard of people in this room who know what it takes to do that job. The Department of War works to deter war, to protect our country and its allies and uphold national sovereignty against foreign and domestic threats. National sovereignty is the supreme absolute authority of a state to govern itself, to manage its internal affairs, and control its territory independent of external interferences. It embodies a nation's right for self-determination and implies equal standing in international law. It represents both independence from foreign powers and the responsibility to maintain order and provide services for citizens within its borders. If, in fact, the cartels are trafficking children, not only into our country, but providing a criminal enterprise infrastructure within our country, is that not external interference? If the head of the snake for most of the global child trafficking, to include their money laundering through organizations like Pornhub, also influences three-letter agencies in the U.S., as well as members of Congress, and higher-ranking influencers in corporate America, is that not external interference? Not to mention, perhaps, even treason, if our intelligence is correct. That members of the criminal enterprise are U.S. citizens aligned with globalist deep state actors? The U.S. military's primary duty is to protect the nation, its interests, and its citizens from foreign threats and external enemies, no matter where they are. While they defend the country as a whole, I clearly understand the Posse Comitatus Act generally prohibits federal troops from conducting domestic policing. But that should not prevent us from hunting down external interferences or protecting U.S. citizens from foreign threats and external enemies with the incredible skill set that our military has. You see, children have become a commodity. It brings in wealth and power and rite of passage and the destruction of those future generations that must replace all of us when we die. With now over 500,000 American children missing and another 350,000 UACs in our country, the question must be asked: what type of citizens will we recruit for our military in the future? If we allow them to be abused and dysfunctional, then is it possible that this will be the type of recruits we have to deal with in our ranks? There are possibly some of you in this audience right now that may have been sexually abused as a child, and you know exactly what I'm speaking about. The warrior ethos is a set of principles, values, and mental toughness guiding our military personnel to put the mission first, never accept defeat, never quit, and never leave a fallen comrade. So what part of this battle within our country to save our children falls within that ethos? I would submit that it clearly falls under never leaving a comrade. Which of us here today would leave a child of our own country behind, or would not give our life to protect those who cannot protect themselves from those external interferences I spoke of? Who among you could walk away seeking a better mission than to defend the Constitution against enemies foreign and domestic? The U.S. Constitution protects citizens primarily through the 14th Amendment's guarantees of due process and equal protection, which prohibits states from depriving any person of life, liberty, or property without legal justification. It ensures fundamental rights, including protection against unreasonable searches, free speech, and treatment under the law. I can assure you that every trafficked child is deprived of life and liberty in every state in America. I can assure you they have no freedom of speech or fair treatment, but they certainly are subjected to unreasonable searches, better known as grooming and rape and fondling and being caged and being tortured, and the list goes on. When it comes to the rescuing of our children, it is simply stated, if we do not, who will? Therefore, I implore you not to shy away from your duties of preventing our children from being exploited. My father was former 8th Group, SF, and he said there's only two types of people in this world. There's followers and there's leaders. Now I see in front of me in this audience a whole room full of leaders that should be willing to say, this will not happen on my watch. Now, I know someone sitting out there, and they're saying to themselves, well, this is easy for you, Mr. CIA Special Operations. You've had special training, and besides, you're no longer in uniform. Okay, Spanky. Let me tell you something. You and I have one thing in common, and it's the most important thing. We both have 24 hours in a day. So what are you going to do with yours? Well, you say, I'm not really qualified to do anything about this issue. Then get qualified. Go to recoveryofchildren.com and sign up for one of our intense 6-day fight child trafficking equipping courses. It's the most comprehensive course in America that can school our military on this AO that they're not familiar with. The area of operations is unlike anything you've experienced. And in order to defeat the enemy and save the future of the Republic, you must know those methods, those maneuvers, those techniques employed by the criminal enterprise, such as deception and disruption and attrition. Out of all my years downrange, I can assure you that while some things are similar, there is much more in child sex trafficking that is not. Each warfighter in this room has a unique skill set that is applicable to the defense of the nation now and will be just as applicable when you retire, especially if you continue to save the most vulnerable. So get in the fight now. Look, if I have 1 penny, I stand corrected. If I have 99 cents in my pocket and I take it to the bank and I ask them to give me $1, will they do that? No, why? Because I'm 1 penny short. It's that 1 penny that completes the dollar. I believe our military is that 1 penny, the most important part that can help complete the efforts of our organization, ARC, and other child rescue NGOs in America that are doing our best to win this war on child sex trafficking. But ladies and gentlemen, we are not winning this war. And we need your help. I've been in this war for 33 plus years now. And one day after seeing as much of the ugliness of trafficking that I could stand, and all that's grown now exponentially in America, I looked up at the sun as it settled on the horizon and the new moon crested the heavens, and I said, Dear God, why are you not doing something about this? You know what he said? I am. I created you. So I tell each of you in this room when you ask that same question, he is doing something about it. He created each and every one of you. So let us join forces and cut the head off the snake so that we can proudly say that no American child shall be harmed on our watch. And when it gets tough in the trenches, remember this: 1 man or 1 woman with courage is always a majority. As 47 has said, America first. And I believe that includes our children, for they are the future of this country. I mentioned my father, who was 8th Group out of Panama with 2 tours in Vietnam. While there may be others, he is the only person I knew in my career, when it came down to the wire, that commanded fixed bayonets. Ladies and gentlemen, we are down to the wire. Fixed bayonets. Saving 1 child may not change the world, but for that 1 child, their entire world will change. May God bless each of you, and may He continue to bless the United States of America. Semper Fi, and in His service. Please. You want to play that video? Thank you.
We're going to play it at the very end.
Okay, good.
Okay. Thank you, Boz, for that powerful and impactful speech and presentation. Our next speaker, Courtney Levette, is a survivor leader, a former member of the U.S. Advisory Council on Human Trafficking, a consultant with the Department of Homeland Security's Blue campaign, and an advocate for legislation in the state of Texas and nationally. She was trafficked when she was 17 years old, first in Texas and then across the U.S. After recovery in 2021, she joined Houston-based No Trafficking Zone, where she serves as the Director of Survivor Initiative. Part of their work includes victim advocacy and collaborating with Houston County's Sheriff's Office and other NGOs and survivors across the nation. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Levette to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so grateful to be here with you all today, but I'm honored to follow the esteemed speakers who came before me, and thank you for sharing your passion and your heart for this issue. And I also want to really thank you, Director Dixon, for hosting this event and for bringing this convening together for a warfighter's approach to combating human trafficking, because this is truthfully a war that we are in, that traffickers and criminal networks have waged against our country, and it is going to take a united force of every single person in this room in your capacity to come together with amazing offices such as the CTIP office. And I want to thank you, Laura. I want to thank the leadership, and especially the other survivor leaders that are here. I thank you all for your courage. You inspire me every day. And even the conversations earlier reminding us of why. What is your why? As you walk into work every day, what do you think about? What are the things that convict you, especially with the times that we are living in? Well, I can tell you what convicts me. My name is Courtney Litvak, and I am a survivor of sex trafficking, and I am also a proud director of the Survivor Leader Initiatives for No Trafficking Zone, and a part of the Department of Homeland Security Blue campaign, and also a child of God. And I want to remind you all here today that we are not merely humans living a spiritual experience, but we are spiritual beings living a very human, very broken experience in a very flawed world. And if you want to understand the depths of depravity and evil and looking the devil in the face, anti-human trafficking is your cause. It can teach you all of the intersections, such as the ones that I'm here to highlight to you all today. Every single one of my former sex traffickers were also drug traffickers, cartel members, former MS-13, Blood, Crips, all these different criminal enterprises, but they had something in common. They not only commodified drugs, they not only commodify arms, but they commodify people. The priceless worth that God has put on each and every one of us, the sanctity of human life. What I want you all to keep in mind as I navigate through some of the teachable moments, because there are so many horror stories that survivors can share, but we're so much more. We are the key. We are the intelligence gatherers. We are the intelligence sources that can make or break human trafficking prosecutions and investigations. And I am so excited and want you all to leave with a fire lit underneath you that before this crime has to become personal to you, understand it already is to each and every one of us. We have a role and responsibility because, as it was shared before, human trafficking truthfully is a national security threat, not just to the United States, but to each and every one of our loved ones, our families, our children, our sons and daughters. We must rehumanize this work that we do, especially with the state of our world we are living in. I believe and I know that human trafficking can and will be the cause that unites every single one of us for a time such as this. My very own journey began at my high school, where I was first targeted after being a whistleblower for a child sexual abuse material ring, formerly known as child pornography. We know there is no such thing as a child prostitute. A child cannot consent to sex. Our culture and society today, and back when I was first targeted in 2015 and 2016 in one of the top school districts in the country, Katy ISD, social media was beginning to take off in a way we had never seen before, and traffickers pay attention. They understand how to be able to keep a constant line of communication open to their victims, but they do not operate in silos. They do not operate as individuals. They operate as these heinous networks of master exploiters who use and abuse their gifts, their God-given gifts, some of them. They will be beloved people who are in positions of power, or there's all different forms of human trafficking that I experience, from gang and street trafficking all the way up to corporate and CEO trafficking. This is a crime hidden in plain sight, but it's taking place at an exponential rate in our own backyard, in our schools, and that's where it happened to me. I should not be before you all today. Some people never want to relive or think about the worst things that have ever happened to them, but I tell you, having a relationship and understanding this battle we fight against is not of flesh and blood, but there is pure evil and people who choose evil, people who are sadistic, but there is good. There is good. There are people on the inside who I have had the honor and privilege from the very first day I was approached by my first trafficker at my school. There was guardian angels around me because there's simply no other explanation, and that I get to stand before you all and share why this is so important and to remember your why and all the things that you may not even see as God qualifying you because he has called you each to the positions you are in. Because had the education been mandated and people understood how many organized criminal networks have infiltrated our school systems, and sadly, so many schools, including my own, were worried about liability instead of accountability. There are so many cover-ups that take place because some people simply can't handle the truth or face how dark this crime truly is, and that's why we have to counteract it with something that is the complete opposite, which is good, which is rehumanizing and understanding this is a human rights issue and putting a face with all the other survivors and victims who are here, but also those who cannot be represented. We must remember that there are so many people who have lost their lives, and they are counting on us to do something different, because once we know better, we're supposed to do better. When I fell into the grips of my first human trafficking network, back during the time in 2016, I was a junior in high school. Under the statute for human trafficking, you do not have to prove force, fraud, or coercion when the victim is under 18. Yet, we know there are good and bad in everything, including with our law enforcement, and there is such a fear that's perpetuated between victims and law enforcement. Therefore, there's mass underreporting. And I experienced these gaps firsthand. And unfortunately, nefarious networks had infiltrated not only the schools, but there's so many other places and common grounds, and I'm so grateful with No Trafficking Zone, we have taken the lived experience testimonies, including my own, and changed and turned legislation into actionable deterrents that prosecutors and judges can enforce, because this crime for too long has been high reward and low risk for the bad guys. The laws that exist and the work that you all do, it should be to support our law enforcement, our military personnel, our war fighters. You're already facing so many things in our current day and in our country and abroad. But human trafficking can teach us, once again, what really matters, and also the evil that people are capable of, but also the resilience of the human spirit. And that is what traffickers seek to break, and my traffickers could not break in me. And that is nonetheless credit to my Lord and Savior Jesus. And I talk about him wherever I go, because I remember being in the darkest days and time of my life. And the one thing that traffickers cannot take from you is your faith and resilience. Survivors and victims should not have to have the courage to run and take their lives back. We need support systems in place with all of you in your roles and capacities to be able to let survivors know sometimes the best thing you can do is to listen and meet them where they're at. So many opportunities passed where my trafficking experience could have been shortened or my entire life could have been changed and different, and I saw the devastation of how many people lost their lives, overdoses, hits for hire, all of these things traffickers glorify. They glorify and they normalize this, especially to our youth. And I was so susceptible after experiencing my first sexual assault from a military personnel when I was still in high school, that then led me to becoming a victim of CSAM. And eventually I was the one whistleblower who decided to go to the school and follow the reporting protocols and trust the ISD police that they would have my back. Not only was I not allowed to contact my family, I had no lawyers present, and I was treated like the criminal. I was investigated like the perpetrators who were committing heinous acts during school hours. My traffickers that approached me and pitched themselves as a savior. We are the answer to all of your problems. We are the only ones who will love you and accept you and show you the way, because nobody else is going to have your back the way we do. You see, they invert every single thing that is good, and their lies and manipulations, they find your most precious vulnerability that they can cater that to. And there are so many different patterns as we work different cases along federal law enforcement. And as I'm very excited in the near future to share more of what God has been doing to use myself and NTZ and our incredible partners and amazing federal law enforcement allies that are here today, all of the victories that are soon to come. But we have to set a precedent that this crime is not hopeless. So many victims, including myself, before I ever got to see the other side of coming out of human trafficking, because less than 1% make it out. And even fewer than that are ever given the platform that I've been so blessed by you all. But you need to remember what you are up against in the psychological warfare that the traffickers use to ensnare victims, the spotters who are promised finder's fees. My life was worth $500, where I was first sold at my high school as a junior, and I was trafficked for the next several years, almost 3 years across the United States. And I saw the worst of men and women and what they were capable of, but I also saw people who, even if they lacked human trafficking understanding, they took this crime personally. And imagine if we all had each other's backs, like the brothers and sisters and daughters and sons that we are called to be. But traffickers replace your identity. They steal your self-worth because you are more easy to manipulate. And when you have this understanding of how you can psychologically terrorize somebody in a way that sometimes is more powerful than physical torture, but that is absolutely a component of it as well, force, fraud, and coercion. These heinous actors are experts at evading detection. They study the laws. So it's so important for us to pass legislation that is survivor-informed and led, but also to learn from our mistakes, to not be afraid to say we don't know, or we know we can be doing so much better and we have a long ways to come, even though there's so much I can say I have seen in the last 10 years that we have accomplished, but how much more can we accomplish when we do this work for the right reasons and remember the victims and the people who are not able to represent or speak for themselves, but I beg to differ that they are not the voiceless. They just do not know yet how powerful their voice is. And one of the greatest solutions that we must encourage is, one, victims solely, very seldomly, will self-identify as a victim of human trafficking. In fact, it can take a year or years for people to understand the complex crime that was committed onto them. Complex PTSD is something a lot of our warfighters sadly can relate to. When I first was extracted, I self-extracted myself from my traffickers after 3 years. I was met with incredible teams of people, undercover uniform officers, even though I was terrified for my life, because there's this code of silence that we all must challenge and break as well, that traffickers operate in the shadows of fear, But God calls us to bring the darkness out into the light. And the more people who come forward to show survivors and victims, but also the traffickers, that we can put politics aside and put anything else that is going on, our children and our nation's safety and the sanctity of human life and the eternal picture of what we are all here in purpose to do. It's either everything matters or nothing matters at all and it's all a coincidence. Well, I don't choose to believe the latter. In fact, my life is living proof. I promise God is in the works of working together some of the darkest, most evil, horrific moments to help somebody else and to shine a light on this darkness that is human trafficking. The nexus between drug trafficking and cartels and gang trafficking, Romeo pimp trafficking, familial trafficking, arms trafficking, all of these things took place, and survivors like myself were a firsthand witness to the devastation that these illicit criminal enterprises cause. These people often come from a brokenness within themselves. But it is every single one of our responsibility to not just talk about all the different things that we want to see happen in our world, but we really need to be the example of that, especially for our younger generations and our students and future leaders that are watching you all, to see what you do. And the discernment that a lot of survivors have, you can feel somebody's energy and feel their genuineness or feel that they have a motive and agenda. And it took myself and a lot of people who have beautiful hearts that I know a very long time to understand. Almost every person, especially traffickers and people participating and profiting and contributing to human trafficking and drug trafficking, they all have an agenda from the very beginning that is evil. People believe this crime is only fueled by greed, but I'm here to tell you it is also just as equally fueled by power and control and people wanting to play God and influence that they can have over the masses, over a small group of people. We've seen all different kinds of stables and trafficking victims, that their experiences, we can learn so much from those behaviors and the patterns. But every single human trafficking survivor and case deserves and demands their own autonomy and integrity to rehumanize them and remind them of their self-worth, because so many human trafficking cases fall apart because the fear of retaliation, that fear and shame and guilt are so powerful. And we have a duty to help survivors see themselves as the priceless, deserving of unconditional love. In this transactional world that we live in, be a person who loves unconditionally and reminds people of the real human experience. And that is one of the greatest ways we can combat evil and look it in the eyes and tell it that it has no power here and to get behind me, Satan. And I lived firsthand that miracles still happen to this day, and that prayer is so powerful, and that we have to combine all of the warfighter approach and response and federal law enforcement and investigations with survivor-led intelligence and understanding to put yourself in a survivor's shoes. But one of the things that we can deeply help strengthen prosecutions and your understanding of just how complex this crime is and these bad actors are, is to think and get inside of the minds of human traffickers. Understanding their motives, understanding their transportation routes, understanding their business affiliates and shell companies and corporate America businesses, such as the ones that were hidden in plain sight, that my traffickers used to launder millions of dollars and trafficked victims from my hometown 10 years prior to me ever being taken. Days after turning 18, they know the laws, they know how to evade detection, and law enforcement is already so overwhelmed. In Harris County, there is an average of 200 runaways, youth, every day. Every day. And human trafficking is taking place and intersecting with every other crime and investigation. And whether you know it or not, you have encountered a human trafficking situation. So if you understand the indicators and understand how to begin helping survivors unlearn those lies and deprogram from all of the ways that traffickers will break a person down in order to accomplish their evil agenda and mission. And some of these people are in very influential places in the music and entertainment industry. I saw firsthand the amount of people who are complicit and who also have become so desensitized. They could be next to a person who's suffering greatly and not even notice. So how do we become in tune the way that God has given survivors the discernment through so much suffering and having to face evil in the eyes and to be tested over and over and over again, only to realize just how resilient you can be in the face of death and evil? These drug and gang cartels operate with impunity, believing they are invincible. And the way that we prove them wrong is we hold trafficking networks and transnational crime enterprises accountable at the highest level. And we do not stop until human trafficking is truly eradicated. And I really like what the Undersecretary shared earlier, is that mitigating human trafficking is more realistic, but if you really want to eradicate it, it is going to take a radical justice and lighting a righteous anger underneath every single one of you. And I want to thank you for hearing and putting yourselves and considering survivors and their experiences and how we can help them unlearn and remember their priceless value. And every single day you go out into the work that you do, remember all of those who are not voiceless, but we need to help them discover their voice and continue to support amazing offices like the CTIP office, support the Department of War and all of their efforts to combat trafficking. Thank you so much for letting me share today, and I look forward to answering questions later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Our next speaker is Mr. Jerome Elam, a survivor of child sex trafficking. After rescue and successful placement in a foster home at age 12, Jerome enlisted in the United States Marine Corps at the age of 17, where he served for 8 years. He attended the University of Florida, earning a Bachelor of Science degree. Motivated by concern to help other suffering children, Jerome began to speak out about his abuse. Today, he is the president and CEO of Trafficking in America Task Force. It's a nonprofit organization that focuses on raising awareness about human trafficking, particularly trafficking of men and boys. He has served as a member of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, International Survivors Trafficking Advisory Council, and Special Advisor on Human Trafficking to the Utah Attorney General. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Elam to the stage.
Undersecretary, Major General Bennett, Ms. Dixon, Boz, distinguished leaders, members of the CTIP office, service members, civilians, guests, and especially my survivor brothers and sisters that are here today. I am truly honored to be here today speaking to you. I stand before you as a survivor of child sex trafficking, a United States Marine Corps veteran, and someone who spent years trying to bring this issue out of the shadows and into the room where decisions are made. And this room matters. Because when human trafficking is discussed only as a social service issue, we miss part of the threat. When it is discussed only as a crime, we miss part of the battlefield. When survivors are invited only to tell painful stories, but not to help design a strategy, we waste intelligence that was paid for at a very high cost. Human trafficking is a human rights abuse. It is a crime, but it is also a national security threat. It is a business model built on coercion, movement, corruption, fear, money, and silence. Those are not separate from the threats that this department studies every day. Those are the same conditions that allow organized crime, armed groups, and terrorist networks to grow. As a Marine, I was trained to understand that an enemy does not survive on ideology alone. An enemy needs money, logistics, access, safe routes, corruption, facilitators, communications, recruitment, pipelines, a population that can intimidate, exploit, or hide inside. Traffickers operate the same way. They identify vulnerability. They exploit need. They use fraud, debt, addiction, threats, violence, shame, and isolation. They move people across neighborhoods, states, borders, bases, ports, and digital platforms. They launder the harm through businesses that look legitimate enough to avoid scrutiny. They learn where enforcement is weak. They learn where systems do not talk to each other. They learn where victims are likely to be punished rather than be protected. This is why a warfighter approach is not about militarizing of victim services. It's about understanding the operating environment. It's about seeing trafficking as a system. The trafficker is not just a single offender. He may be a recruiter, transporter, document handler, landlord, buyer, gang member, contractor, corrupt official, cartel facilitator, or online broker. Sometimes he is all of those things. Sometimes he looks respectable. Sometimes he uses the language of love, employment, migration, opportunity, or protection. But underneath the disguise is an illicit network that feeds other illicit networks. Where people can be bought and sold, other things can be moved too: drugs, weapons, forged documents, stolen identities, cash, intelligence, and influence. A trafficking route can become a smuggling route. A corrupt official who ignores forced labor can ignore weapons movement. A criminal enterprise that profits from commercial sexual exploitation can use those profits to fund violence somewhere else. So when we talk about trafficking, we're not talking about an issue outside national defense. We're talking about a threat that can live in the seams of national defense. It can touch military communities. It can contact contractors and subcontractors. It can touch supply trains. It can influence overseas operations. It can infect online spaces where our service members, families, and children live. It can affect the vulnerable people around our installations and in the countries where we serve. And the truth is, traffickers study our systems, so our systems must study them back. That brings me to the role of survivors. Survivor leadership is not symbolism. It is not a photo opportunity. It is not a panel at the end of a conference after real decisions have already been made. Survivor leadership is threat intelligence from the human brain. Survivors can tell you where victims are missed, where screening questions fail, where fear overrides trust. The first contact with authority either opens the door to safety or closes it forever. Survivors can explain why a victim may lie, return, protect the trafficker, deny the abuse, or refuse help. Not because the victim is uncooperative, but because coercion changes the way survival looks. A victim may be watching exits. A victim may be thinking about a younger sibling. A victim may be worried about immigration status, warrants, debt, addiction, or retaliation. A victim may have been taught that no one in uniform can be trusted. A victim may have been harmed by someone who appeared to be in authority long before your team arrived. If we do not understand that, we misread the battlefield. We mistake trauma for defiance. We mistake fear for consent. We mistake controlled speech for independence. We mistake survival behavior for criminality. This is how victims disappear in plain sight. And from a defense perspective, that is also how intelligence is lost. Because every victim who is not identified, is a missed chance to disrupt a network. Every survivor who is not protected is a witness silenced. Every case treated as isolated is a pattern of unconnected. Over the next 4 years, we need a decisive shift. First, we need a common operating picture across the department. Every service member and civilian does not need to become a trafficking investigator. but every person in this institution should understand the basic signs, reporting pathways, and the difference between trafficking, smuggling, prostitution, labor exploitation, and child soldiering. Leaders should know where trafficking risks appear in their commands, contracts, communities, and areas of responsibility. We need training that is not a check-the-box requirement. It should be scenario-based, survivor-informed, and be specific to the role commanders, law enforcement, medical personnel, contracting officers, inspector generals, chaplains, family support recruiters, and deployed personnel. Second, we need to treat labor trafficking seriously as sex trafficking. Sex trafficking rightly draws outrage, but labor trafficking can hide in plain sight because it's often wrapped in paperwork, contracts, visas, debt, subcontracting claims, housing arrangements, recruitment fees, and threats of deportation or blacklisting. If someone's building, cleaning, cooking, translating, guarding, or supporting mission activity under coercive conditions, that is not just a labor issue. It is a security vulnerability. A supply chain that can hide forced labor can also hide other threats. Third, we need survivor experts embedded at the design level. Survivors should help build training, review protocols, advise on tabletop exercises, evaluate victim response systems, and pressure test policies before they are deployed. That does not mean every survivor should be placed in every room. It means a department should have a disciplined, compensated, vetted structure for survivor consultation with safeguards for privacy, security, and well-being. Do not bring survivors in only to share pain. Bring survivors in to share doctrine. Fourth, we need better interagency international coordination. Trafficking does not respect jurisdiction. Neither can our response remain trapped inside the jurisdiction. Defense, law enforcement, intelligence, diplomacy, labor, child protection, financial crime experts, and survivor-led organizations must be able to communicate with purpose and need. The goal is not to collect more information for its own sake. The goal is to connect information early enough to protect victims and disrupt offenders. Fifth, we need accountability that reaches beyond the low-level offender. If it only arrests the person closest to the victim, we may leave the network intact. We need to ask, who profits? Who transports? Who advertises? Who launders? Who protects the operation? Who looks away? Who benefits from the cheap labor? Who pays for access to another human being? Follow the money. Follow the movement. Follow the documents. Follow the demand. Follow the silence. A policy that does not reach the ground, a policy that does not reach the ground is just paper. The 4-year vision is this. Year 1, build a stronger common operating picture, update training, map risk areas, clarify reporting pathways, and formalize survivor consultation. Year 2, deepen enforcement and prevention in contracting, supply chains, installations, and overseas environments. Create practical tools that commanders can use, not just documents that sit on shelves. Year 3, strengthen interagency, international partnerships, especially when trafficking overlaps with drugs, arms, corruption, migration groups, and terrorist financing. Year 4, measure results honestly, not by how people sat through training, but by whether indicators are recognized sooner, victims are protected faster, networks are disrupted more effectively, and survivor expertise institutionalized permanently. That is what seriousness looks like. I want to close with this. When I was a child, the people who exploited me counted on silence. They counted on shame. They counted on adults on asking the next question. They counted on systems being fragmented, distracted, intimidated, unwilling to see what was in front of them. Every trafficking network counts on some version of this same silence. But I also know what it means to wear the uniform of the United States Marine Corps. I know what it means to be taught that you do not walk past a threat because it is complicated. You identify it, you study it, you adapt, you protect the vulnerable, you hold the line. Human trafficking is not inevitable. It is organized, it is financed, it is protected by fear, corruption, demand, and indifference. Anything organized can be disrupted. Anything financed can be traced. Anything protected by silence can be exposed. The question is whether we will treat the seriousness with the seriousness it demands. Survivors aren't asking the department to replace its mission. We're asking you to recognize that combating trafficking is part of protecting the force, defending human dignity, strengthening national security, and denying illicit networks the human currency they use to expand. A warfighter approach means we stop looking at trafficking as someone else's issue. It means we understand the enemy's terrain. It means we protect victims without hesitation. It means we build systems that traffickers can easily exploit. It means survivors are not bought in after the strategy is written, but are trusted to help write it. And it means that when we say zero tolerance, the world knows we mean it. Thank you for your service, thank you for your leadership, and thank you for the honor of standing with you in this fight.
Thank you so much, Jerome. Our next speaker is Ms. Laura Lederer, subject matter expert for the CTIP office. Ms. Lederer is the former senior advisor on trafficking in persons at the U.S. State Department. She helped stand up the Office to Monitor and Combat Trafficking in Persons, and then served as the senior advisor on human trafficking to the Undersecretary for Global Affairs from 2002 to 2009. From 2017 to 2019, she was a subject matter expert with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services for their SOAR, Stop, Observe, Act, and Respond training on health and human trafficking, and their Runaway and Homeless Youth Guide on human trafficking. She was, or has served as the subject matter expert for the U.S. Department of War, the CTIP PMO office, since 2013, and is responsible for the content development of our general awareness and general awareness refresher training, as well as other specialized trainings, including the Student Guide to Preventing Human Trafficking, a military chaplain's training on trafficking, and a Defense Health Agency training on health and human trafficking. She assisted in the development of a data collection instrument that allows the DOW to document sex trafficking and labor trafficking incidents within the DOW. Please welcome our DOW CTIP SME, Ms. Laura Lederer.
Well, everyone, I'm told we're running really late, so I'm going to truncate my presentation. So much has been said about the message we wanted to give today, which is that human trafficking we saw at first as a human rights and a law enforcement issue, but in the last 5 years, we've really realized it's a national security issue, and that is right where the warfighter should be. And I remember hearing Boz say once at a conference, we need a warfighter perspective to really end this. And I think that's why we're all here. So we've developed 3 new trainings on human trafficking that are specifically a trio of trainings for the warfighter. And I'm just going to show you a little bit of them, maybe take 10 minutes and then cut me off because we really want to have time to have a little bit of a back and forth. So before I begin, though, I want to also recognize the importance, as several other speakers have said, of the survivors in this battle to combat human trafficking. You've heard 2 of them today. But we have a Survivor Voices of Human Trafficking project that we launched in July of 2021. And it's on our CTIP website. I hope you'll take a time to look at it. And there are a number of survivors who've helped us with it, and then a number of other survivors who are in the room. I'd love all the survivors to just stand up for a minute and say, and I just wanted to say thank you and recognize you for all the work you've done. Can the survivors stand up? We have. Thank you so much. We have 20 of them on our website telling their stories, both in video and then we have their transcript. And I hope Courtney is going to become one of those soon. She couldn't tell as much of her story as she wants to because she's in the middle of federal prosecutions. And so giving away the details of that story, she wasn't able to do it. But I've heard it. It's harrowing, and it makes the point about the nexus between human trafficking, drug trafficking, arms trafficking, terrorism. It makes the nexus between the street gangs, the cartels, the foreign terrorist organizations. And those stories are what we need to help us understand, unpack, deconstruct human trafficking, and then make a plan for how to combat it. So, and then I also just wanted to recognize the service providers who are in the room. There are a lot of you, and you have helped me so much understand this work. Can you stand up? Can the survivors and the service providers stand up and say, I wanted to say thank you to you too. Because some people think that you're rescued and then you're automatically restored. Well, that's not the case. It sometimes takes, years to restore. And as Courtney said about PTSD, those of you who understand PTSD know that it's a long process, and many of our survivors have that same type of process. So thank you so much. So then let me just really zip through a couple of these. So let's do the trigger warning. We should have done it at the very beginning of this before anybody. Okay, good. So now we're on the warfighter approach. And I just said that we thought of this 20 years ago as a human rights and a law enforcement issue, but it's a national security issue too. And so next slide. The first step is to recognize that the 21st century warfighter really faces new adversaries, right? They're narco-terrorists, they're rogue militias, they're cartels, they're street gangs, they're other transnational and domestic criminal organizations. They're very sophisticated and well-organized. They're foreign terrorist organizations that rely on human trafficking to support and fund their operations. Now, these actors employ asymmetric and irregular tactics using human trafficking alongside other illicit activities to gain power and control. And I think we're only beginning to realize how that works now. When we asked Undersecretary Tata what we needed to do to train warfighters about these new adversaries, he said, warfighters need to be trained deeply and broadly to understand these new adversaries and how they're all connected up and how to combat them. So who are these new adversaries? Slide 6. Human trafficking is not carried out by a single type of offender. It's used by a diverse range of very sophisticated criminal and terrorist networks to support and sustain their operations. And these are just a couple of them. The list is miles long. But drug cartels and narco-terrorists such as the Sinaloa cartel and cartel, I'm going to just say CJNG, and the Gulf cartel, and there are a number of others that are from south of our border. Transnational criminal organizations like the Chinese triads. We've had a number of cases in the U.S. of human trafficking by the triads and snakeheads, the Russian mafia, Yakuza, Black Axe, street gangs, prison gangs, outlaw motorcycle gangs such as MS-13, Trenda, Aragua, the Bloods, the Crips, Hells Angels. Courtney mentioned a couple of these. The only ones I'm mentioning are ones where we know that there have been huge human trafficking cases that have been brought against these groups, and we know that they are using human trafficking as a means to their end. And then violent extremist organizations and rogue militias like ISIS and Boko Haram. We all heard about the kidnapping of 200 young girls, some as young as 8, 9, 10 years old, who then were given as concubines to these militias as kind of rewards for their in their battle. So human trafficking is embedded in a lot of these nefarious kinds of activities. Next slide. So why human trafficking? Why do these these terrorist organizations and transnational criminal organizations engage in it. According to Department of War experts in irregular warfare, human trafficking isn't the end goal, it's a strategic tool that's used to advance their broader criminal and operational objectives. It's used to finance their operations, it's used for capacity building, it's used to link and expand networks, and as I said, it's used also to reward their soldiers or their minions in their groups. And then several people have mentioned that once these routes are established, if you have a human trafficking route, you can also move drugs and arms and terrorists and even intelligence and information across these routes. So next slide. So to the maps now. We are engaged in some original research in the CTIP organization, and I want to thank my director, Linda Dixon, for her vision in allowing us to do this. It took many, many hundreds of hours to do this, but what you're seeing here is one map. I've done a map of the northern border too, and I can only talk you through it a little bit because I do want to have time for questions and from the audience and a little discussion. But what you're seeing here is routes across the border. Green lines represent the foreign national sex trafficking cases that have been prosecuted by the U.S. Department of Justice. Blue lines indicate foreign national labor trafficking cases investigated by the Department of Labor. Black and dotted dashed lines mark the activities of 3 major foreign national gangs now classified as domestic terrorist criminal cartels that are involved in human trafficking. And these lines reflect only known routes and patterns identified through case law. So we used, we didn't use hearsay. Every case law, then we read the actual case, we went back and found out what their routes and patterns were and how they moved people into the United States. And then there are a couple here that I'm not going to have a chance to talk to you about the cases themselves, but the red line represents the Kadena case, which was our wake-up call in the U.S., a case of children as young as 9, 10, 11, 12 years old who were trafficked into the United States, walked across the border, across the desert, driven along the side, along Louisiana and into Florida and into a Florida trailer brothel and North Carolina and South Carolina trailer brothels, and then were sold there for years before they were finally discovered, and then the case was prosecuted. And until that time, we thought this is happening out there somewhere else. It doesn't happen in the U.S. Happens in Russia, happens in South America, happens in Southeast Asia, does not happen here. And then we realized it happens here. And we thought for a long time it happens only foreign nationals are being brought into the U.S. And trafficked here. Next slide. I'm not even going to talk about this. Oh, these are different methods. I'll skip it for purposes of, I'm sorry, I want to have time. This is the northern border map. Every one of these lines represents a case, and I'll just give you one case. At the northern border, there's 3 hotspots. The Swanton sector, where lots and lots of people are quietly being moved from Canada into the U.S. From that border is Vermont, New Hampshire, and New York. And there have been a number of huge trafficking cases that have been uncovered and prosecuted. And then Minnesota and North Dakota is the next hot spot. And I think as many as the country of India claims that as many as 20,000 were trafficked into the U.S. using student visas. They were flown into Canada and then walked and driven and Ubered into the United States. And Harold, maybe you can help us with that. I know you and I talked about it just a little bit, but I know that the country of India has been in contact with the U.S., and that case was uncovered when 4 people died after they were told to walk across the border in the middle of the winter and couldn't make it. They were like 12 feet from the border when they died from the cold. And then the last one is the British Columbia, where we have found tunnels, the same kinds of tunnels that we found in the southern border. We found 250 tunnels along the southern border, and the same kind of tunnels in the northern border. Next slide. These are the breach methods. Next slide, and I'm going to skip all the cases, Brenda, because you don't want me to talk about them right now because we don't have a lot of time. I'll just do this one case. Can you back up 1 minute? And if we have time, I can do a couple of the cases in the can you back up one more, Marcella? Yeah. These Department of Labor cases, I was even surprised when I came across them. These were children who were trafficked across the southern border, and in this case, at least 102 foreign national children in one company were trafficked to a meatpacking company where they were working at night. They were going to school during the day. They had sponsors through HHS, and they were going to school during the day, but they were working at night to pay off their sponsors, unbeknownst to the U.S. system. They were doing all the kind of work that we banned in the early 1900s. They were working with the in the slaughterhouses with dangerous chemicals and with dangerous and hazardous equipment. And again, these cases, and I found 15 large cases where there were hundreds of victims in each of these cases, and the same with the sex trafficking cases. We mapped 15 of the largest cases where there were hundreds and sometimes thousands of victims that had come, that were trapped in these trafficking situations. When I first saw these pictures, I thought I was looking at 1920s pictures. This is a very young child. And the way this was uncovered was when she came to school with burns all up her arms because the chemicals had spilled on her. And she was, she was hurt. She was complaining that something was wrong. And later, when the community was interviewed, they said, well, we knew something was wrong. She was falling asleep in school. She wasn't getting good grades. These kids had terrible burns on their arms. But we thought that we were helping to keep it quiet. We thought we were helping because we knew they had debts to pay back home, and so we wanted to help them. Well, they were unwittingly facilitating this trafficking from these very sophisticated networks that have brought hundreds and thousands of these children into our factories and our warehouses and kind of back a century worth. So we definitely need to begin to look at this. So now, Marcella, one more, and then I'll just talk a little bit about these new grow farms. Oklahoma's struggle with Chinese grow farms is kind of something to learn from, because since this has been uncovered in Oklahoma, it's spread to at least 24 other states in the U.S. In Oklahoma, apparently Chinese companies bought over 400,000 acres of land. They purchased them mainly through shell companies, some using U.S. citizens, most of whom don't even live in Oklahoma. They set up these giant marijuana farms. They're illegal grow farms. And in the first year, over 23 million plants were grown. Oklahoma used less than 900,000 of them. They convinced Oklahoma to allow this because they said it's medical marijuana and it'll be used in your state to help you. But all of that 22 million plants were a product that was shipped to every state in the U.S. and then across the ocean to European countries, and it made $300 million in a single year. And it was touted at first as harmless, but Oklahoma said they saw an upswing in murder, extortion, robbery, illegal casinos, money laundering, gun distribution, human smuggling and human trafficking, sex trafficking and labor trafficking, all explode as a result of these grow farms. These workers were, apparently they were smuggled in, and then they were working without pay and 14, 16, 18-hour days. They were called ghost farmers because no one ever saw them unless they were sick. And when they got sick, They were dropped in the middle of the night at Oklahoma's emergency hospitals and just, kind of set down there. They would get this thing called chemical pneumonia from the chemicals that were being used in the grow factories. They were living and working and eating inside these buildings that you're seeing there. And when it was raided, they also found a series of brothels that the Chinese had set up to service these laborers. So there was sex trafficking and labor trafficking going on. And they were living 30 to a room, no running water, no electricity, one bowl of food a day. Does that sound like the United States? It's happening in 24 states in this country right now. And then the next slide just shows you 6 of the other states where the Department of Justice has prosecuted human trafficking cases related to these illegal Chinese grow farms. And left to right there, New Mexico on a Native American reservation where violence and victims of human trafficking were uncovered. That's Oklahoma again there. Southern Oregon, where Chinese triads took over the marijuana industry and used WhatsApp to recruit Argentinian and other South American workers. They were promised $2,500 for 3 weeks of work, but they were paid nothing, and then they were trapped there and ended up working there for years without pay. And then finally, Massachusetts and Maine, where victims said that Chinese TCOs, transnational crime organizations, kidnap and smuggle Chinese into the U.S., force them to work on their farms without pay, and in the brothels where they were found nearby to service the workers. So you can see that there's all kinds of things going on in the United States, too. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to clear a map that we're doing of the internal as well as that foreign national trafficking that's going on. But we're looking at the routes and patterns internally of our own homegrown trafficking, including street gangs in our cities and the rural routes across our major highways. And as soon as that's done, we'll post it on our website. So we've developed, and I'm going to end here, next slide, 3 trainings. A foundational training is the warfighter training that makes the case that this is a national security issue. It makes the case that human trafficking is linked to all these other forms of trafficking, drug trafficking and arms trafficking and terrorism, and that the warfighter needs to be trained to recognize these and to know what to do, how to respond appropriately when they encounter them. And then the specialized training, Major Bennett, that you so beautifully described. National Guard are everywhere. I loved how you said we're embedded in the communities, and that if you have the eyes and ears and you know what to look for, you will be able to help us uncover and then respond appropriately, catalyze rescues. So I just thank you for the National Guard's involvement and for helping us to create this specialized training for the National Guard. Why do we do these specialized trainings? Because when we first started to talk with doctors about human trafficking, they would go, gosh, that's horrible, but what does that have to do with us? And so we had to show them how they would encounter it in their own daily work. And that's what we're doing for the National Guard. You're deployed here to help with crime prevention. You might see it this way. You're deployed here to help with a homeless encampment. You might find trafficking here. You're deployed at the Super Bowl for security. You might find trafficking here. You're deployed at the border. This is what it's going to look like here. And so each training has that specialized aspect so that we can help people understand
our map, becomes our fight. We carry names. Like sacred vows we won't forget.
And just, kind of set down there, they would get this thing called chemical pneumonia from the chemicals that were being used in the grow factories. They were living and working and eating inside these buildings that you're seeing there. And when it was raided, they also found a series of brothels that the Chinese had set up to service these laborers. So there was sex trafficking and labor trafficking going on. And they were living 30 to a room, no running water, no electricity, one bowl of food a day. Does that sound like the United States? It's happening in 24 states in this country right now. And then the next slide just shows you 6 of the other states where the Department of Justice has prosecuted human trafficking cases related to these illegal Chinese grow farms. And left to right there, New Mexico on a Native American reservation where violence and victims of human trafficking were uncovered. That's Oklahoma again there. Southern Oregon, where Chinese triads took over the marijuana industry and used WhatsApp to recruit Argentinian and other South American workers. They were promised $2,500 for 3 weeks of work, but they were paid nothing, and then they were trapped there and ended up working there for years without pay. And then finally, Massachusetts and Maine, where victims said that Chinese TCOs, transnational crime organizations, kidnap and smuggle Chinese into the U.S., force them to work on their farms without pay, and in the brothels where they were found nearby to service the workers. So you can see that there's all kinds of things going on in the United States, too. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to clear a map that we're doing of the internal as well as that foreign national trafficking that's going on. But we're looking at the routes and patterns internally of our own homegrown trafficking, including street gangs in our cities and the rural routes across our major highways. And as soon as that's done, we'll post it on our website. So we've developed, and I'm going to end here, next slide, 3 trainings. A foundational training is the warfighter training that makes the case that this is a national security issue. It makes the case that human trafficking is linked to all these other forms of trafficking, drug trafficking and arms trafficking and terrorism, and that the warfighter needs to be trained to recognize these and to know what to do, how to respond appropriately when they encounter them. And then the specialized training, Major Bennett, that you so beautifully described. National Guard are everywhere. I loved how you said we're embedded in the communities, and that if you have the eyes and ears and you know what to look for, you will be able to help us uncover and then respond appropriately, catalyze rescues. So I just thank you for the National Guard's involvement and for helping us to create this specialized training for the National Guard. Why do we do these specialized trainings? Because when we first started to talk with doctors about human trafficking, they would go, gosh, that's horrible, but what does that have to do with us? And so we had to show them how they would encounter it in their own daily work. And that's what we're doing for the National Guard. You're deployed here to help with crime prevention. You might see it this way. You're deployed here to help with a homeless encampment. You might find trafficking here. You're deployed at the Super Bowl for security. You might find trafficking here. You're deployed at the border. This is what it's going to look like here. And so each training has that specialized aspect so that we can help people understand what their role is. First, that they play a vital role, and then what their role is in helping to stop it. So we're excited about this work, as you can see, and we're excited to have all of you as partners, and we look forward to working with you further. And I'm going to wrap it up. I'm sorry I talked so fast, but I definitely want to have time for, and Linda, if you just.
One more time for questions.
I just wanted to say thank you to Linda Dixon, my boss, who is fantastic, Brenda Zarita and Marcella, who are our CTIP team. Thank you.
All right, thank you, guys. Marcella, go ahead and show the video. I don't think we have time for questions. Unfortunately, it's 11 o'clock. Could you go ahead and just show? I want to show something that Basil Boss put together for us. It is impactful. So if you can take a couple minutes and just watch this for us, please.
There's a quiet kind of evil that don't make a sound. It don't crash through doors, it just pulls us down into names erased and faces sold, where a heart beats cheap and a soul grows cold. But there's a line in the sand drawn firm and wild by us, the ones who refuse to forget one child. We've seen the dark where hope runs thin, still choose to walk straight into it again. We don't come home without the child, through the aching dark, through the undefiled, where the lost, unnumbered, forgotten, exiled. We don't come home without the child, through every lie, every twisted mile, through shattered trust and the devil's trial. Love keeps breathing fierce and wild. We don't come home without the child. Every door we knock is a reckoning, every chain we break is a reckoning. Every whispered prayer in the dead of night becomes our map, becomes our fight. We carry names we've never met, like sacred vows we won't forget. Where fear says turn, we take one more step into the places the world neglects. We don't come home without the child, not while a single breath is defiled, not while a soul is trapped and reviled. We don't come home. No cost too steep, no road too wild, no shadow deep, no heart to exile. Hope runs stubborn, mercy slays. We don't come home without the child. We've learned what silence weighs on skin, how it settles deep and won't give in. We've stood in rooms where time won't move, where every second has something to prove. And still we go when the light runs thin, not for applause, not to fit in, but because somewhere a name still calls from behind locked doors and broken walls. We don't bring back answers, we bring them home. We don't leave breath to face it alone. And if the world forgets what it swore was true, we carry it further than fear could do. Not statistics, not stories, not lost causes. We don't come home without the child, through every grave where hope was piled. We speak life, we death has smiled. We don't come home without the child. So when the night feels too far gone and the silence feels too strong, there's a promise still running through the wild. We don't come home without the child.
I want to ask all our survivors here that are on our Survivor Voices page to come up to the stage, please. I see Harold here. I see Nisi. I need you guys to come up to the stage. We want to give you a little token of our appreciation for all the work. Shelby, come on up, Shelby. Kiana. All right. Everybody, so these are just a few of the survivors that's on our state, that's on our website. And we just want to give you guys.
Thank you.
All right, and do I have anybody else from the? Okay. Oh, well, oh, Ronnie, oh, now, Ronnie gonna wait till the last minute. He didn't want to come up till he saw we was getting a gift. He wasn't gonna come up here. Hey, Ronnie. Is it Jerome? Jerome got here. Thank you, guys. Also, I want to remind everybody that we have certificates for training. Okay, so as a DOW personnel, and then anybody who wants one too that's here, get a certificate on your way out. They're outside to hand out to you if you didn't receive one already. And take it back to your training manager or your learning management system coordinator to make sure you get training credit for taking CTIP training today. Because this was a training, right? We understand a little bit more about what this issue is and how we can all be involved in fighting it. So a hand again to all our speakers. They were incredible. To all our survivors. Keep up with all the great work that you all are doing. And thank you all for attending today's ceremony and event. And we hope you guys learn something and appreciate what it is and what we do and how you all can be involved. Thank you.